Or bring us to the topic of the moment, the highly successful strikes in Iran. Let me read the bottom line here. President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history, and it was a resounding success, resulting in a ceasefire agreement and the end of the 12-day war. There's been a lot of discussion about what happened and what didn't happen. Step back for a second. Because of decisive military action, President Trump created the conditions to end the war.
There's an organization in the U.S. called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. DTRA does a lot of things for our nation, but DTRA is the world's leading expert on deeply buried underground targets. In 2009, a Defense Threat Reduction Agency officer was brought into a vault at an undisclosed location and briefed on something going on in Iran. For security purposes, I'm not going to share his name. He was shown some photos and some highly classified intelligence of what looked like a major construction project in the mountains of Iran. He was tasked to study this facility, work with the intelligence community to understand it, and he was soon joined by an additional teammate. For more than 15 years, this officer and his teammate lived and breathed this single target, Fordow, a critical element of Iran's covert nuclear weapons program. He studied the geology. He watched the Iranians dig it out. He watched the construction, the weather, the discard material, the geology, the construction materials, where the materials came from. He looked at the vent shaft, the exhaust shaft, the electrical systems, the environmental control systems, every nook, every crater, every piece of equipment going in and every piece of equipment going out. They literally dreamed about this target at night when they slept. They thought about it driving back and forth to work, and they knew from the very first days what this was for. They weren't able to discuss this with their family, their wives, their kids, their friends, but they just kept grinding it out. And along the way, they realized we did not have a weapon that could adequately strike and kill this target. So they began a journey to work with industry and other tacticians to develop the GBU-57. They tested it over and over again, tried different options, tried more after that. They accomplished hundreds of test shots and dropped many full-scale weapons against extremely realistic targets for a single purpose: kill this target at the time and place of our nation's choosing. And then, on a day in June of 2025, more than 15 years after they started their life's work, the phone rang and the President of the United States ordered the B-2 force that you've supported to go strike and kill this target. Yesterday, I had the incredible honor and privilege of spending time with these two Defense Threat Reduction Agency officers who've given so much. To you both, thank you, and thank you to your families. So on Fordow, in June of 2008, you can see these three holes. Depicted here is the main exhaust shaft with two additional ventilation shafts on either side. The United States decided to strike these two ventilation shafts, as seen here on the main graphic, as the primary point of entry into the mission space. In the days preceding the attack against Fordow, the Iranians attempted to cover the shafts with concrete to try to prevent an attack. I won't share the specific dimensions of the concrete cap, but you should know that we know what the dimensions of those concrete caps were. The planners had to account for this. They accounted for everything. The cap was forcibly removed by the first weapon, and the main shaft was uncovered. Weapons 2, 3, 4, 5 were tasked to enter the main shaft, move down into the complex at greater than 1,000 feet per second, and explode in the mission space. Weapon number 6 was designed on each side, so there were 6 on each side. Weapons number 6 was designed as a flex weapon to allow us to cover if one of the preceding jets or one of the preceding weapons did not work. Keep it going for a minute. You'll see inside the mission space. Unlike a normal surface bomb, you won't see an impact crater because they're designed to deeply bury and then function. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. All 6 weapons at each vent at Fordo went exactly where they were intended to go. A bomb has 3 effects that causes damage: blast, fragmentation, and overpressure. In this case, the primary kill mechanism in the mission space was a mix of overpressure and blast, ripping through the open tunnels and destroying critical hardware. The majority of the damage we assessed based on our extensive modeling was a blast layer combined with the impulse extending from the shock. Imagine what this looks like 6 times over. A point that I want to make here: the Joint Force does not do BDA. By design, we don't grade our own homework. The intelligence community does. But here's what we know following the attacks and the strikes on Fordo. First, that the weapons were built, tested, and loaded properly. 2, the weapons were released on speed and on parameters. 3, the weapons all guided to their intended targets and to their intended aim points. 4, the weapons functioned as designed, meaning they exploded. And we know this through other means, intelligence means that we have, that were visibly, we were visibly able to see them. And we know that the trailing jets saw the first weapons function, and the pilots stated, quote, "This was the brightest explosion that I've ever seen. It literally looked like daylight." Let me now turn to the bomber crews themselves, give you a few details about them. The crews that attacked Fordo were from the active duty Air Force and the Missouri Air National Guard. The crews ranked from captain to colonel, and most were graduates of the Air Force Weapons School headquartered at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. I will state for the record that there is no beach volleyball or football at the Air Force Weapons School. There were male and female aviators on this mission, and a crew member told me when I talked to them on video the other day that this felt like the Super Bowl, the thousands of scientists, airmen, and maintainers all coming together. One last story about people. When the crews went to work on Friday, they kissed their loved ones goodbye, not knowing when or if they'd be home. When those jets returned from Whiteman, their families were there. Flags flying and tears flowing. I have chills literally talking about this. At Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and around the region, we assumed a minimum force posture. Most folks had moved off the base to extend the security perimeter out away from what we assessed might be a target zone, except for a very few Army soldiers at Al Udeid. At that point, only 2 Patriot batteries remained on base, roughly 44 American soldiers responsible for defending the entire base, to include CENTCOM's forward headquarters in the Middle East, an entire air base, and all the U.S. forces there. The oldest soldier was a 28-year-old captain. The youngest was a 21-year-old private who'd been in the military for less than 2 years. So let's put ourselves out there for a second. Imagine you're that young first lieutenant, you're 25 or 26 years old, and you've been assigned as the tactical director inside the command and control element. You know that you're going to have approximately 2 minutes, 120 seconds to either succeed or fail. And yet our U.S. air defenders had only seconds to make complex decisions with strategic impact. These awesome humans, along with their Qatari brothers and sisters in arms, stood between a salvo of Iranian missiles and the safety of Al Udeid. They are the unsung heroes of the 21st century United States Army. That, my friends, is what America's Joint Force does. We think, we develop, we train, we rehearse, we test, we evaluate every single day. And when the call comes to deliver, we do so. And one last thing. Our adversaries around the world should know that there are other DTRA team members out there studying targets for the same amount of time, and will continue to do so.
32 NATO countries committed to spending 5% of their GDP on defense, on actually investing in the NATO alliance. So I hope with all the ink spilled, all of your outlets find the time to properly recognize this historic change in continental security that other presidents tried to do, other presidents talked about. President Trump accomplished it. It's a huge deal. I want to read some of the assessments that have been provided, because whether it's fake news, CNN, MSNBC, or the New York Times, there's been fawning coverage of a preliminary assessment. I've had a chance to read it. Every outlet has breathlessly reported on a preliminary assessment from DIA. I'm looking at it right now. Again, it was preliminary, a day and a half after the actual strike, when it admits itself in writing that it requires weeks to accumulate the necessary data to make such an assessment. It's preliminary. It points out that it's not been coordinated with the intelligence community at all. There's low confidence in this particular report. It says in the report there are gaps in the information. It says in the report multiple linchpin assumptions are what this assessment, a linchpin assumption, you know what that is? That means your entire premise is predicated on a linchpin. If you're wrong, everything else is wrong. And yet, still, this report acknowledges it's likely severe damage. Again, this is preliminary, but leaked because someone had an agenda to try to muddy the waters and make it look like this historic strike wasn't successful. I'm going to get to the chairman in a moment because he's going to lay out the particulars for you based on his professional military experience. But here's what other folks are saying. The DIA that put that report out says that this is a preliminary low-confidence report and will continue to be refined as additional intelligence becomes available. How about the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission? The devastating U.S. strikes on Fordow destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility inoperable. Have any of these quotes made their way into the New York Times or the Washington Post? MSNBC? CNN? Any of these quotes? How about this one? This is a new one from the UN, the United Nations. No friend of the United States, or certainly Israel often. Here's the head of the UN Atomic Energy Agency this morning, Rafael Grossi. U.S. and Israeli strikes caused enormous damage to Iran's nuclear sites. John Radcliffe, the director of the CIA, putting out a statement just last night. CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from a historically reliable, very different than preliminary assessment with low confidence. He's saying historically reliable and accurate source and method that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. CIA continues to collect additional reliably sourced information to keep appropriate decision makers fully informed. How about DNI Tulsi Gabbard yesterday? She writes, and I quote, "New intelligence confirms what POTUS has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed." Time and time again, I can go down the list. Those that understand, those that see, those that do proper assessments recognize that what the United States military did was historic. Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump, because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. You have to hope maybe they weren't effective. Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented them isn't true. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it. Spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful. This was an historically successful attack, and we should celebrate it as Americans, and it gives us a chance to have peace, chance to have a deal, and an opportunity to prevent a nuclear Iran, which is something President Trump talked about for 20 years, and no other presidents had the courage to actually do.